Hey, everybody. Welcome to the internet's favorite movie-centric list-making podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Josh, joined with me always by the wonderful, awesome, great Jen. Hey.
Right now what we need is one of those movie clapboards so we can go take two. And
Yeah.
that should do it. We had a little behind the scenes kerfuffle. So I'm really glad that everybody is here now. I'm so glad that we're here now
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
actually able to converse with, the live well, let's just say I'm really glad to be here. And then we'll just leave it at that. Hopefully, take two will be amazing and we will just move right on from there. How's
We
that?
can hope. We can hope.
I have prayer beads, and I think I might even have like a little bit of some blessed water somewhere around here. So we'll sprinkle pixie dust and bless the place, and we'll see what happens. This may or may not be a direct result of my list making. Not to give too many spoilers away, but my list this week is filled with Nazis, and yeah, so it might actually be a little bit of a kind of curse situation, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. It's gonna be good.
I could make a low-hanging fruit joke about that, but I will not. Call it self-control.
I'm glad one of us has it. Oh
Whew.
boy.
Yeah, so we're
Are you
here.
excited? Are you
Yeah,
excited about this week's
absolutely
list?
excited. Because I'll just go ahead and get into the spiel as I wrote it down here. See, me prepared. Um,
Yay.
I'm gonna grab. Maybe you can hear it as now deceased radio show host used to say. I have it right here. It's,
This is starting to sound like a John Candy skit.
I miss that guy.
Me too. Me too.
In honor of D-Day, we have decided to list our favorite U.S. military-centric films set in World War II. They range from Navy to Army, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I didn't finish writing it. I'm sorry.
Well, my list takes copious amounts of liberty. Uh, see what I did there? And applies it to this list because that's what it needs, more liberty. And yeah, I came up with a list. I seriously hope that this list brings as much um needed relief into such a serious topic. I was telling Josh before the podcast started that as I was watching some of these uh well, first of all, as I was rewatching some of the movies, I realized that my fascination with war movies has kind of waned a lot. And I don't know whether it's just like oversaturation or whether I'm just like feeling a kind of fatigue with it, which, that happens in your movie watching career. Sometimes you just get fatigued by genres or, specific types of material. But in this case, I felt so fatigued by it that I actually got like kind of creative in what I decided would be my presentation. So it is my heartfelt desire and hope that what I share with you tonight is an interesting take, if not always the most realistic take of World War II.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That's my spiel.
I was going to say something. Don't remember what it was. Oh yeah. One of the things that I've realized as I didn't actually rewatch any of my movies was that the there is a very majorly playing theme about war movies and especially when it's like US centric,
Hmm.
and that's one, the glorification of the war itself, and there was just a point in time when you couldn't have a movie about World War II, especially uh, about World War II, that didn't involve all of our boys overseas being, the greatest of heroes and the having the highest of morals and things like that. It was a very heroic, brave thing. And don't get me wrong, you can't take away anything from the greatest generation that went over there and fought Nazis, but it certainly did downplay a lot the actual hell that is war and getting shot at and shells and just wondering if you're even going to survive. And the movies that I picked don't shy away from the realities of war. And for those of you wondering where are all the John Wayne flicks in my list, nope, sorry, not going down. Didn't take that route.
I have none of those on my list either. I'm completely serious when I say that my list totally diverged from what I would normally take as the homework in a more sort of not. I'm trying to think of a good way to say it without spoiling it, so I'll just say I definitely did not take the literal meaning of this assignment as like, I mean, there are some, but not the con. I really only saved those movies for the ones that I thought were excellent, really, really excellent. And the rest of my list is made up of movies that are either set in World War II or contain World War II. This is what it was about, but they're so fictional that you'll completely understand what I'm talking about the moment that you hear my titles. So I'm excited now.
Now I'm worried.
Don't be
Hmm.
worried. Just realize that this was definitely me taking liberties with the assignment. You'll understand the moment that I introduce my number 10 film.
Well, it appears Jen pulled a Josh, and that's not something I'm accustomed to. So, without further ado, Jen, then let's get on to your number 10 and see what this is all about.
All right. So, my number 10 film is a film that needs zero introduction. Most people know of this movie. Most people know it as Guillermo's movie because it's Guillermo del Toro's, uh, sort of most interesting treatise on what sort of goes into making a monster. It's Guillermo's Monster Squad almost. Way back when in the time of the Nazis, Guillermo came up with this idea. Well, no, he didn't come up with it in the time of the Nazis, but he came up with an idea that in the time of the Nazis, they were working on pulling demons out into the world so that they could use them as weapons. So it was such a weird idea. But hey, you know what? The source material is what the source material is. And it's actually spawned from uh, a set of other fictive pieces. But anyway, the movie is called Hellboy. Hellboy is one of those movies that the Nazi themes are so strong. And you can't tell a Hellboy story without realizing, without incorporating the ideas that both made Hellboy and that also tie Hellboy together. Because there are pieces of the Hellboy story that are completely dependent upon what was happening in World War II and what they intended to do. I think that there's some really interesting through lines in the Hellboy story that continue to kind of be the okay, well, there's this anti-fascism sort of aspect to it, but there's also this really interesting idea that sometimes in order to defeat evil, you have to be the monster yourself. And you know, I wouldn't say that I agree with that, but I would say that this is a super interesting idea that doesn't get put forth in fiction quite enough, I don't think, even in horror fiction, um to my liking, because I think it's something that we grapple with a lot. Now, I mean, I could sing the praises of Hellboy all day, but as my number 10 choice, I'll keep it short. Absolutely love Hellboy as a movie for more reasons than just Hellboy's origins. I also love the idea that even after all of the years that go by, there is still a presence of the Third Reich, which is chasing Hellboy, bent on using him, using what he can do, using other associated things around him, and then us needing to use him as the ultimate weapon against evil. Um, so this is sort of what I was talking about. Um, Not all my movies are quite so way out there, but Hellboy rose to this occasion for me, and I submit it as my number 10 choice.
Well, they were still government backed, right?
Yeah, they kind of were, weren't they?
So I'm going to count that as a sort of military esque.
Oh, it was very military-esque. I mean, he was controlled by the CIA.
Yeah, that can, yeah, you're good. Okay, if that's your out there one, then I've got nothing to fear. You're just proving once again you understand the assignment, except you understand it like fourth dimensional math, and I'm over here like, but Army and Navy, that's what we want.
That when I say I took liberties, I don't mean I took shortcuts. I just took sort of a 30-foot approach to this by looking down at it, not from, so far up that I can't see what's going on, but, just a little bit more than just the, yeah, let's all, board the USS Arizona and see what kind of movies we can pull from there. A little bit different.
I get that. I get that. Good pick. I should probably do the thing that I always do, but haven't done yet. Because, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to follow along with the lists or kind of get a look at what they look like as a whole, you can always go to letterboxd.com, follow 1021 Pod, where we post all of our lists for you to peruse as soon as the show's over. So head on over to letterboxd.com. They still don't pay us for that. And check out the lists as I try to buy a little bit of time.
As Josh sets up the list that didn't quite have a place, but now it will. It will definitely have a place.
Hello Boy wrote Hello Boy. Hello
Yeah, hello,
Boy.
boy. Yep, that's exactly it.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Guillermo del Toro's Hello Boy. Now that seems really awkward. Name for a film.
Technically, it's hello, just hello, because that's just what he does. I gotta ask, did you see Hellboy?
Of course.
Okay, just checking. I mean, sometimes you haven't seen movies that I think are obvious that everyone should have seen, but
Everybody's seen Hellboy. I didn't see the
I
remake
figured. Oh, I saw the remake. I was not as super excited about it. It was okay, but it wasn't. It was not Guillermo. So
it's one of the reasons I didn't watch it, because I knew it wouldn't have that going for it. But that was your number 10. We'll go to my number 10. My number 10, my kindergarten version of the list that I came up with, the topic that I came up with. Chen's doing pre-algebra, and I'm over here with 2 + 2 is U571.
Nice.
U571 is my number 10 because it is a movie set in World War II about a U.S. naval group that captures a German U boat in the hopes of getting their decoding machine. What is that the proper term, you think? They're trying to get the machine that cracks the code that the Nazis are kind of sending to each other. Probably should have read that first. U571 stars Matthew McConaughey, Bill Paxton, Harvey Keitel, and John Bon Jovi as, like I said, their naval group. And this team that sees an opportunity to capture a German U boat. I've already said all that. And they kind of take it over. But the thing is, when they run into other Germans who are like, "We are trying to help. We need to help you." And they're like, "Nah." And they have to get away. And there's a lot of cat and mouse stuff going on. Kind of a thriller, kind of a, a little bit of action. Nothing super great, but it is an interesting story set during the allotted time for the list. I know that there are different. You know what? There's really nothing deep about this movie at all, and the historical accuracy is no. But maybe it's because I just watched Past X that you know what, sometimes it's okay to check out a movie where this interesting thing happens and you don't really question it. You buy into the story that they're trying to tell you, and that's fine. And not everything has to be upper echelon, top tier Shawshank storytelling. Because if you're setting your expectations that high all the time, then you're just going to be let down more often than not. You have an interesting cast, you have interesting characters, and visually, it's pretty good. U571 is my number 10.
Okay, so I think that that's actually a more I'm just gonna say like it's a more appropriate choice. And I don't mean that in the like my choices aren't appropriate. I just mean like it's more appropriate to the keeping of the list idea.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I apologize in advance for being so off the rails. Because I really do feel like this is way off the rails. But
Well, I'm gonna take a bit of a detour on my next one. So
oh, okay. Well, my number 9, I doubt is as far of a detour as you're going to take. Is a movie which not a lot of people that I know have seen. Um, it's called it's called Frankenstein's Army. I'm just gonna ask Josh, have you seen Frankenstein's Army? I'm assuming no.
he
Um,
sits in stunned silence.
yeah. Okay, so let me give you the skinny on Frankenstein's Army. Frankenstein's Army basically is everything that you would want out of a B movie horror fest. And you add the backdrop of Russian soldiers battling Nazi conjured Franken creatures. It's set at the end of World War II. Um it is super interesting the way that they set it up. It's definitely schlocky. I mean, like, you got to walk into this realizing that it's Saturday at the matinee and you just want to watch something that is going to take you out of time and place, and this is the movie to do it. Um I actually think that I rated this a little bit higher than Hellboy because first of all, they get big props for having big props. This movie is amazing in the inception of its world, right? It really does sort of give you a feeling of fantasy-esque while keeping you firmly in, yeah, this could have happened, sure, why not? And part of it is the way that they present the both the characters, but also it's the backdrop, it's the settings, it's the locations that they chose, it's the set designs that really kind of root you in this sort of like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. I will say one quick thing about this. When I say that it's schlocky, I mean like it's really schlocky. Um, it's over the top gore, which is one of those things that's I feel like a lot of movies that deal with war are, but we accept it a little bit differently when it's like Saving Private Ryan. In this case, it's like over the top, lots of blood everywhere, lots of uh real practical effects, which are almost rare in this day and age. And lots of um the creature designs are very, again, they're rooted in practical effects. They're very almost sort of like, oh my god, did you really create that? That's just so crazy. The I would say that maybe the most important thing to know about this is the movie follows tropes. It's, we've got the good guys who follow every good guy trope that there is. We've got the bad guys who really follow the bad guy tropes in like every single way. I mean, they're like literally just the worst of the worst. So much so that you're like happy to see them die. Um, and there's a presence in this movie that is really unsettling, like it is sort of stomach churning and not the kind of thing that you want to be witnessing. But as a found footage movie, or in the found footage genre, you kind of can't turn away. And because of that, feels a lot like um it feels a lot like a commentary on war, as opposed to just being a war movie. Like it really has something to say. Now it has something to say under gallons of blood and tons of latex and, all the practical effects that make this thing absolutely horrific. But if you watch really closely, you get a fairly well constructed movie that's actually pretty good. So I go with Franken. I'm so sorry. I just lost my title. Frankenstein's Army. I don't know why I lost that. And that, I think, is the just the premise of the movie should be enough. If you need more, all the soldiers that are involved in this are all they, they all everyone is going to go through their own metamorphosis, let's just say. So I won't give a ton away from this movie, just because I feel like a good sort of Vincent Price movie, it's really worth watching just for the schlocky journey. It's good. It's actually pretty good. So Frankenstein's Army gets my number 9 choice.
That's Frankenstein.
I guarantee you have not seen that movie.
I definitely have not seen that movie. I can't say that I've heard of it until this point in time. And
but you did see it, right? I mean, I feel like Jack Sparrow. I've never heard of that movie, but wait a minute, is it on Letterbox? But it was on Letterbox.
Yes, it's on Tubi. If
Oh, yay!
feel like interested in seeing it, which I'm adding it to my watch list now, which you can see on the Letterboxd.
I mean, it's so crazy over the top. Like, again, it's a really good Saturday matinee, like, a popcorn flick, and you kind of you start reveling in the, oh no. Like, I mean, I remember when I first watched this movie, I was watching half of it like through my fingers because I was like, no, I don't want to see. Okay, wait, yes, I do. That's how crazy it was.
Well, my Number 9 is one that actually has uh, a bit of a musical tie-in.
Ooh.
You want to hear my rendition?
Yes. Sing some karaoke for us,
All
Josh.
right. Well, I won't be doing the singing part, just the music part.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay, it's the final countdown.
Hey, I love that song, but I am a child of the 80s, so.
Speaking of 80s, in 1980, a movie was released called The Final Countdown, and it involves just the one of my favorite things, time travel. And I know what y'all are
Ooh.
thinking. It's a time travel movie. What about World War II? Well, silly people. The question is, what if, what if a modern day 1980 U.S. Uh, Navy ship somehow in a freak time vortex traveled to World War II? Not just World War II, but this aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz, appears just outside of Pearl Harbor, where it just left to do some exercises in the Pacific. But a time vortex hits, and when they come through on the other side, they're like, "What's going on? Let's try to get some little lay of the land here." So they send a reconnaissance plane, and they're like looking at the pictures that get brought back, and it is the day before the Pearl Harbor attack. All of the ships are just sitting at Pearl Harbor, nice and snug, and they're like, oh geez, guys, there's the Japanese are going to attack at any second. Oh, they're already attacking these other parts, but the big attack's tomorrow. And they wind up engaging with a couple of the Japanese pilots, and then they have this really big conundrum, wondering, all right, we know the Japanese are about to bomb the crap out of Pearl Harbor. We're a late 20th century United States Navy aircraft carrier with late 20th century aircraft. And we could easily defeat all of these guys by ourselves. Because we would get the jump on them, you see, because they don't know we're here. Nobody knows we're here. But we know where they are because history. But if we do that, if we defend Pearl Harbor, what will that do to the timeline? But if we don't defend Pearl Harbor, how will we live with ourselves? So that's, of course, not a question for, the lower ranking uh, naval officers or the crew. That's something for the brass to deal with, and that's kind of what the real crux of this movie is. It's not so much how do we get back. It's not so much how are we going to fight the Japanese. It's more of the moral quandary: should we? And I think the ending is satisfying. If if you could tie time travel to anything, I'm glad that time travel got tied to a World War II war movie in a way that, at least at the time, it was a tiny bit before my time, but seems more original than many of the other uh, military films set during that same time period. So the final countdown is my number 9.
Nice. I have to admit that is I've seen that movie, and um I I'm always taken aback by the idea that I mean, rightly so, because psychologically I do understand why we do it this way. From a narrative perspective, I get it. um when the stakes are really high, and when are they higher than in war, or at pivotal points in history when things matter the most, we tend to ask ourselves the most philosophical questions that there are. And I remember when I saw this movie that I personally thought that the biggest philosophical question behind it, again, you alluded to it, was, not can we do it, but should we do it? And on top of that was this idea about whether or not the justification for the kind of carnage that was about to happen, whether there could be a mitigation of those damages. But then the big question is, if we change history, what happens to history? And I have to say that part of the allure of this movie has a lot to do with the time travel aspect, because they do sort of grapple with the change in events, as perhaps if we move forward in history, then what? Where would this have would it have actually changed anything at all? Um, just really interesting ideas. So I think that was a really good choice. I like that movie too.
Thank you, thank you. I'm just a sucker for time travel.
So am I. So am I. I have some interesting idea. We'll have to do that at some point. Um, okay. So number, um, I'm on number 8. My number 8 movie is, I chose this movie because honestly, the acting in this movie gets me every single time. Um, we're Most of us today are probably aware and understand of the idea behind the Marvel's. No, is it Marvel? Is it DC? No, I can't remember. DC. It's DC. Um, the DC idea of the Suicide Squad, and the Suicide Squad is it's an old idea. It's been around for generations and generations. Um, but basically, you take a misfit group of people and you teach them to be assassins. You teach them, or you bribe them, or you cajole them, or basically say, hey, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill you. But you get kind of like the dregs of society to do these things, because either they have like nothing to lose, and so they're more willing to put it all on the line, or they have everything to gain, and that they are going to be, the best of the best in the situation. Um, so there's a movie that came out, and I think it came out in 1965, and it actually set up a number of movies afterwards. It was set in 1944 during World War II, and it basically follows this military unit of 12 convicts. The movie title is The Dirty Dozen. Now, the reason that I chose this movie over a lot of other movies, first of all, it's based on a novel, which I didn't even know it was based on a novel, and that was really exciting. Um, but the story is, I personally think, extremely, it's compelling, but it's compelling with the actors that they have. Um, there is something about the stage presence, the movie presence of Ernest Borgnine, Charles Bronson, um, George Kennedy, Ralph Meeker, people that Telly Savalas, Clint Walker. I mean, these are people that, if you don't know who they are, I could go back and look at 1960 cinema, but these are really like huge title characters, or huge title actors playing these characters. And when you put all these people together, there is an energy on the screen which really transports you back to the time. So it's March, it's 1944. Um, the major, who is Major Reisman, he is basically saying okay to the I think his last name was Wooden, or Woden, sorry, Sam. And he's what he says is, look, I need for you to get me these guys. We'll pardon them afterwards. You get them in to be this elite assassination squad. And they absolutely do not rise to the challenge. I mean, they are just like such a band of misfits and, you know, anti-establishment, very sort of like over the top, use the F word if they could have back then. Those, the kind of people that just like have it get out of my face attitude. In the beginning, it really does feel like this has zero chances for success. Um, as the movie goes on, there's a lot of little things that happen, and the team becomes far more cohesive than I think that they expected to be, and they rally to the side of Reisman. They really give him something to work with, which I don't think any of them expected, and a lot of that stems from both their want to be pardoned, but also they sort of commit to this idea of working together after a long time, in order to achieve the goal. And the whole movie is really about that journey. But the piece that makes this crazy is, you know, all of this is all sort of bred out of the US military wanting to you create a squad that is, more untraceable, more untrackable, doesn't have the same kinds of constraints attached to it that the US military might. The code of honor is sort of like out the window, and that both works and is a disadvantage to them. I I'm going to say that there's parts of this movie that are extremely off color. Off color meaning, like, there's things in this movie that I feel like today we would go, oh my god, really, really. But they work so well in what I think was the storytelling of the day. Everything kind of comes together, and the plot of this, or the overall execution of this story, could very well have been the original DC Suicide Squad. I mean, it absolutely has that same feel to it, minus superpowers. Um, I think, it's quite an interesting study in human dynamics in war to see what happens here, but we still get plenty of war action as well. And there's a lot that happens by the time that the movie is done, when you realize that what they're doing, they all realize too that what they're doing may not be what they signed up for, may not be what they thought they signed up for. Anyway, this movie I think is one of the best. uh it just, again, the acting is so good in this movie that it stands out in my mind as a movie that I would watch again and again, despite the fact that it's a war movie, because it really does give you that sense of, wow, yeah, something big is happening here. So The Dirty Dozen gets my number 8 choice.
I believe that might be a good pick.
I think that's more in line with, doesn't veer as far off of the beaten track. Although, buckle up, because the next movie on my list will definitely bring us off into the jungle again. So,
Let
all
me get
hope is not lost.
my Alka Seltzer.
Is that you, Dr. Livingston?
You presume? I I see. I don't have the Dirty Dozen listed as a movie that I've seen. I don't believe.
Oh, Josh, run, don't walk to watch that one.
I'm trying to remember because look it up on my letterbox. God, we're just buzz marketing letterbox like it's a sponsor, which it's not. No, I don't have it listed as something I've seen. Although I know I've seen a lot of it over the years. You know, it's one of those things that's
Hmm.
it has just come on so many times, but I've never actually sat down to watch it. I could tell you scenes for sure, but yeah, I do need to get around to actually sitting down and soaking it all in.
There's a lot of iconic moments in the Dirty Dozen, but the movie it's I'm not kidding. I mean, like you watch the Dirty Dozen and you go, "Oh, that's where they got that idea from." And
Hmm.
as I was thinking about it, the idea of a Suicide Squad is actually very old. It's been around for a long time. And there's been a lot of literature that has, done the work of narrative storytelling around it. But what makes this just the tour de force that it is the acting. I mean, it is Ernest Borgnine. It is Telly Savalas. It is everybody. And there is something that is that's both dynamic but also just sort of like you couldn't ask for a better all-star cast in this kind of movie than the people that they got. It I mean Charles Bronson was absolutely astounding in this movie. And sometimes you forget, as we move into movies that are a bit more modern day, we forget that the older movies had to really push hard on the narrative and the dynamic of the characters of the actors to portray things in a way because we don't have green screen. You don't have the kind of CG that you can sometimes sort of use a little bit to be creative where you have like holes in the story. You don't have that. And so this movie is just so solid with its acting that it's just definitely worth watching. Sorry, I didn't mean to take up more of your time, but
It's all good. It's all good. That means I have what for my number eight. For number eight, it is. Well, let me put it this way: you said you had an all-star cast, right? And you're number eight.
yes. Yes.
Well, I see your all-star cast, and I raise you a Lee Marvin,
Hmm.
an E.G. Marshall, a Fred McMurray, a Van Johnson, and you know what? Why not a Humphrey Bogart?
No, oh, okay. Now we're talking.
I'm talking about 1954's The Caine Mutiny.
Oh, good choice.
Because
Good choice.
one of the things that is very common in war films in general is the fact that the enemy is always the enemy. You know, it's always the opposing country slash group slash whatever the case may be. But there are also stories out there where the the antagonist, the threat, comes from inside the house, so to speak. So what happens when you take a skipper, a captain that has, I'm sorry, for being proper here, a lieutenant commander, that sounds right, and give him, mm, I'm trying to think of a delicate way to put this because I don't want to just say, oh, the man, the crazy. Because it's not that he was crazy. After all, he got to his rank due to merit and possibly other things. The point is, he became the skipper of a ship, but whether it was due to a lot of combat, whether it was due to um, the sun, who knows? He was becoming less effectual as a leader, as a strategist. He Queeg was, for all intents and purposes, just losing his marbles and taking it out on the crew, becoming more and more unstable. So when a uh, a mutiny happens aboard the ship, to help the crew survive, um, there's fallout, and that fallout takes the form of a court martial. Not gonna really uh, get down into the nitty gritty of the details here because I do believe it is a movie very much worth watching. I think the thing to really dwell on, as it were, isn't the story itself and the performances, which are superb, but more the idea that in World War II and in any war, you have this dynamic between the people that are brought together for a mission, and this dynamic doesn't always gel. It doesn't flow smoothly at all times. And when that poison comes from the top, it's it's really an exercise in maintaining the integrity of an entire ship, because once that starts, everybody's life is in danger, and it's up to uh, responsible individuals on the chain of command to sort of suss out and notice um, peculiar things for the safety of themselves as well as everybody else. We don't get enough stories, at least in my opinion, of where the conflict is from within the ranks. I should correct that. We don't get enough good stories where the conflict is within the ranks. There's a few a few good men. That's a great story about inner turmoil in the military. But seeing this during a, as you put it, a high tension time, a high stress era of history, and seeing it play out when, let's see, when was this? I said 1953 or 1954. So 1954, we're talking less than 10 years after the actual war ended. And we're getting stories like this, and there will be others like this on my list. It's just sobering, I think, to see that very soon after the second Great War ends, um, the veil of happy-go-lucky, everybody's an awesome hero was lifted, and that is why the Kane Mutiny is my number 8.
I okay, so I'm gonna mention something about this, which I think is so super cool, because when I first watched the Kane Mutiny, one thing that I absolutely loved about it was the intricate and very cool correlations with mutiny on the Bounty. And the idea that there's this similar dynamic between the underling, who on the Bounty is Christian Fletcher, and Captain Bligh, and how Humphrey Bogart's character goes through this kind of Captain Bligh moment in the mutiny, where he realizes that strict order and his adherence to what he thinks are the principles, which really are not. Um, the kind of swirling superstition. That's not. I said that wrong. The kind of swirling suspicion around him is something that he can't escape, but he also can't back down from. Like the moment that he realizes that this is what's happening, he realizes he's got to double down on it. And whether it's rational or not, it is like the only way that he can maintain control. And so there are these parallels between those two movies that make me so happy because they tell fundamentally two very different stories, but have all these interconnecting ideas, which are it's just fabulous. It's really good. And you're right. It's really the dynamic of the inside of the engine that we're seeing instead of the outside dynamic. Let's narrate the battle, let's narrate the war itself, let's narrate these big huge ideas. And in this case we're getting down to let's narrate the granular of the cogs in the machine and see what really makes things tick. And more often than not, what ends up happening is we see that it doesn't always run very smoothly. And yeah, I like that. So awesome movie, really good. And I agree. That is a really good movie. I don't why am I messing up so much? Um the other thing that I really love about this movie is the lighting, because the lighting in this movie has a similar affect to it that a lot of noir-esque movies have. It's not noir, but there are heavy uses of shadow in this movie as well that really give you this feeling of eeriness where it is appropriate. And it kind of indicates in some places where you should be thinking that things are off kilter because the world starts to change in the lighting shifts. Really excellent. Absolutely love this movie. That couldn't have been a better choice. So good job, Josh. Okay, well, I'll move on to my number 7 then. So, my number 7 is a movie which probably people haven't heard of. I'm so sorry to keep always interjecting all of these weird, quirky movies, but sometimes I think that they're actually worth visiting. And if you haven't seen this movie, it's definitely one that's really a different perspective, if not way off in the weeds and maybe even, like I said, far out in the jungle. The movie is called The Devil's Rock. Now, one of the things that I always find really interesting about the 20 and 21st century take on the Nazis is we have assigned to them, especially post 1980, a lot of nefarious superstition, a lot of nefarious supernatural stuff that goes on. And some of that is justified because we look back at some of the things that were Nazi experiments and we go, well, what else were they trying to do other than, mess around in worlds where they shouldn't have been? And I hearken back to my number 10 choice with Hellboy and say, yeah, this is exactly what we're talking about. And The Devil's Rock, it's a 2011 film that came out of New Zealand. Now, it's a horror film, so just be prepared. Um, and it deals with the eve of D-Day, right? And on the eve of D-Day, Operation Overlord, which was the code name for Normandy, basically what they're going to try to do is take out either well they're going to try to sabotage this there's a big giant uh bunker that is on this one island. So they send this group of troops over there, and what they're going to try to do is distract them, get them to be focusing their attention in a completely different direction. And the beginning of the movie starts out like pretty much any World War II movie would start out. The beach is mined. There's a lot of tank traps. There's all kinds of interesting, if deadly traps that lead up to this big place. And once they get there, they realize that something is wrong. They're met first of all, I got to talk about this. There's this thing that they call a gun pit, and the set for the gun pit is absolutely stunning. I mean, it's like amazing. And they spend a bit of time there. And so the soldiers go through this thing where they discover, okay, something's not right here. They hear screams, they hear gunshots, things clearly are happening. They are in tunnels. There's a lot of sort of like high suspense feel. It almost feels like a video game in parts of it. There's a lot of sort of tension in not knowing what's happening. And then there's a whole lot of kind of lost time for some of our characters. And that lost time ends up being when some things happen that will come to light later. So one of our characters is being tortured by a Nazi, and wants to know what is going on, why is he there, and stuff like that. And our main character, I think his name is Grogan, he hears this scream from the background, and he escapes, and he's able to try to track it down, but he doesn't understand why. Okay, so without saying a whole lot more, let's just say there is a book of black magic that is involved. And it turns out that the Nazis were going to use this book of black magic to not just summon a demon, but basically summon a demon that would be so incredibly tempting that it would absolutely, kind of like a siren almost, that it would take everyone's focus and attention away from anything that they were doing. I mean, when you think about it, that would be a pretty interesting weapon to have. And so as the story kind of moves on, there's this, okay, that seems ridiculous, and how could this possibly be true? But everybody sort of understands, oh wait a minute, yeah, this is actually what's happening. There are two instances where they were somehow were able to summon the demon, right, a demon. And there are instructions in this ritual that, let's just say that they need help in order to do them. And like, I don't want to give away too much that's going on in here, but I will say that by the time that this movie ends, it has taken a bit of a dramatic curve, and it doesn't end on a happy note. I First of all, I love this movie because it wasn't afraid to sort of stare in the face the idea of human desire, and also the sort of like overarching lust for power, and it marries them both together nicely in this idea of black magic that they were trying to use. But I also really liked it because, although it necessarily villainizes the Nazis, it also gives us a chance to realize that, lust for power is lust for power, and we can all succumb to it, whether we're on the good side or on the bad side. And it became a little bit more of a philosophical treatise in the end about what it takes to really push back against that. Um, it's a great movie to watch. It's not, I won't say it's like, it's not Saving Private Ryan, it's not The Dirty Dozen, but it is a really worthwhile movie to watch as a counterpoint, with a lot of black magic and, demon building and supernatural oogie boogie stuff going on. Um and also a really poignant sort of understanding of what the lust for power was driving people to do. And I think that this is important because, I mean, ultimately at the end of everything, we're talking about the side, the Nazis, which were consumed by the need to really take a lot of power away from everybody else. And that to me is sort of like, yeah, okay, this is what they were trying to do, but hey, we're not immune to this either. Everybody could succumb to this, and for that reason I really liked it. Okay, so I choose The Devil's Rock, released in 2011. It's a New Zealand horror film, really worth watching. And I think really good, like really good in its both inception and its execution. So there you go.
Once again, not something I've heard of.
I didn't think so. This is one that I don't think very many people have heard of. It feels more like experimental. No, no, not experimental horror. It feels like kind of offbeat horror. Like, you wouldn't normally see this. And I think part of the reason you wouldn't normally see it is because, yeah, Nazis. It's one of those. It definitely has a World War II feeling to it, but it also has a there's a lot of deep psychological stuff attached to it. Um, and also, I just give these guys so much credit because the sets for this they're just great, simplistic, and even understated, but totally excellent. Really, really good. So, yeah, number 7, definitely worth a good watch.
Well, I'm going to tell you my number 7 is not something I can really take a deep dive into. It's not a very old movie, to be honest. It's within the last 3-4 years or so. But
Wow, that new?
yes, but I
Okay.
enjoyed it, and I'm listing it for that
All
reason.
right.
Starring Tom Hanks. Nope, it's not that movie.
Yeah, you know where my mind went.
It's Greyhound.
Oh.
There's just something about Tom Hanks, and as much as I would love to say, you know, it, it's Commander Krause. No, nope. You watch a Tom Hanks movie and you know it's Tom Hanks. It's Tom
Right.
Hanks. But there's something about whenever Tom Hanks plays worried commander that makes you go, yes, this is the guy you want in charge. Um, the Greyhound is the story of the um, well, it's the story of the ship and set during World War II. They're having issues with U-boats. I do dig me some submarines if you haven't noticed by my list so far. But it's not done in real time, but it's definitely it skimps on the unnecessary conversation, and I sort of mean that from a filmmaking aspect. They're not there to develop intriguing backstories for the commander or crew. You're going to see some pictures. You're going to hear bits and pieces of about people's lives, but that's not what this is about. This is um, like I said, not real time, but it's only about the situation. You get in, and when the situation's resolved, you get out. And I really enjoy it when a movie can sort of pace itself in that way, where I always bring up North by Northwest when it comes to the quintessential. The movie starts, bam, you're in it. The thing is happening virtually immediately, and that's sort of the same vein of Greyhound, where Tom Hanks, sorry, Commander, no, it's Tom Hanks. When Tom Hanks um, starts getting his ship uh, in ship shape, and then bam, he's got to fight Germans, and then he continues to fight Germans until credits roll, pretty much. No prologue, no epilogue. It's just you're in it. The story's being told, and told very well. Is it the greatest World War II movie? No, no. There are a lot of others that do it, quite frankly, better. But just due to uh, the non wasting of time and the absolutely wonderful visual effects, I really enjoyed this movie. And every second seemed to count, and the tension seemed very real. I can't really, like I said, I can't really break it down as well as some others, but um, it's a truly enjoyable film with wonderful performances, and I think if you get a chance, give it a shot. You might not be disappointed. Greyhound is my number seven.
Yeah, that's a good movie. I completely agree. And Tom Hanks is, first of all, always a joy to watch. But secondly, in this role, he's really, really, he shines. It's a great role for him.
Yeah, he's just the guy that you want to be in charge.
Yep, absolutely. Well, my number six is this. We're coming back into reality. That's a bad way to say it. We're coming back into the list. True Intent, and this movie it was celebrated at the time, but it's old enough that I don't expect that a lot of people will have seen it. However, this is definitely one of those movies to watch if you get a chance, because there is a lot in here that is relevant even today. And when I say relevant today, I mean like the things that people are going through are I, to me, this is the very near and dear part of what war does to people. In 1958, the movie The Young Lions came out. And it's an interesting idea here that created this movie. Let me preface this by saying if you know who Irwin Shaw is, you will understand the depth and the scope of the storytelling here. Irwin Shaw has created some of the most memorable novels and plays that I think most of us uh, would recognize in one form or other. And his legacy it's enormous. It's really pretty breathtaking. Um, and a lot of his movies have been or a lot of his stories have been translated into movies or into teleplays, things that I think in some ways for most of us who are into kind of older cinema, he has a big footprint. And so anyway, that's part of it. um but to go back to the Young Lions, um the idea here is really to narrate both the disillusionment of war and also the idea that sometimes when we do nothing, we do more harm than anything else. And big it's huge, actually. I'm going to read just very briefly from, and this actually comes from Wikipedia. So, but I feel like this first paragraph really, well, I'll read the second one too, but this really encapsulates who our main character is, and then I'll go to the next character, which is kind of a very important one as well. Um, German ski instructor Christian Diestel is hopeful that Adolf Hitler will bring new prosperity and social mobility to Germany. So when war breaks out, he joins the army, becoming a lieutenant. Dissatisfied with police duty in Paris, he requests to be transferred and is assigned to the North African Campaign Front. While there, he sees what war has done to his captain and his captain's wife, and he's sickened by that behavior. So that sets up Christian. And, as the movie progresses, Christian is more and more disaffected. In fact, when they figure out what is happening in concentration camps, it does break him. It just really breaks his entire psyche. Um, but then there's Noah. Noah works as a junior department store clerk and attends this party, and he meets someone who becomes his love interest. Her name is Hope, and he wants to. Obviously, he wants a lot, but he basically wants to have a family with her, and he- the idea with Noah is Jewish, and it obviously this is a big issue at the moment. There's a lot that's happening here in that dynamic. Noah and another character named Michael basically enter the army on the opposite side on the same day, and they go through basic training together, and they experience things together that are heartbreaking on so many levels. I think one of the things that happens in this movie, which overarch everything, is this like search for hope, this search for, I want to see something good and I can't find it. I want to find a reason for being here, and they keep searching for it and keep searching for it, and it becomes really difficult. Um, in the end, and I don't know if I'll spoil anything by saying this, but in the end, what happens to Christian is he basically he falls apart. He falls apart so much so that in the end there is like zero affect to the people around him who watch him die. And it's heartbreaking. It's so sad. It's difficult to understand how they could just watch him die. It just like it fills me with so many different feelings. But by the time that the movie is over, the ultimate sense of hope is basically, our main character now, Noah, is his wife, whose name is ironically Hope, or unironically. And and the idea that life can continue on. It's a really great movie. It involves a lot of the, I would go back to the philosophical ideas of World War II and what people were hoping for on both sides, what they were trying to accomplish, what they thought might be happening, and how they could be so disillusioned by what really was happening. I'm going to mention that this movie also has a very all-star cast with Marlon Brando, Montgomery Clift, who is so underrated but so amazing, Dean Martin, Hope Lang, Barbara Rush, and Mae Britt. Really excellent, excellent acting chops going on here, and absolutely wonderful story. So this movie I highly suggest. It doesn't get higher on my list because as I go further up the list, I get into the more, yeah, this is what I thought I wanted to bring into the list more. But as a solid, sort of, hey, this is about World War II and here's some really hard questions, The Young Lions absolutely fits the bill. So that's my number 6 choice.
The Young Lions.
Yeah, really good, really, really good. And again, same thing I said before. Practical effects everywhere. It's really about their dynamic. There's a lot of good stuff happening in the movie, like sets and designs, but it's the dynamic between everyone that really carries the movie. So really good choice.
Well, I would
I
hope
love.
you would think it's a good choice. It's on your list.
Well, I meant it was a good choice to convert to a movie. Irwin Shaw's treatise of this particular, the novel of this, he didn't do the screenplay adaptation, but it carries enough with it that I think it did it justice. I mean, you know who
Um,
Irwin Shaw is, right?
yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, everything that he writes feels like it's got some kind of massive gravitas attached to it. And yeah, this movie is no different.
Well, I guess it's time for my number 6.
It is.
Well, much like my number 8. What's my number 8, right? 1098. Yes.
Yes.
The Kane Mutiny. Mr. Roberts deals with similar themes. But in case you haven't figured it out, Mr. Roberts is my number 6.
You don't say.
Directed by John Ford. I know. I'm waiting for the oohs and ahs to stop.
Yes,
So,
ooh. Yes, very good.
starring Henry Fonda, James Cagney, Jack Lemmon,
Also awesome.
and all amazing people. I, you know what? Startling confession to make. I don't think I've ever actually watched a James Cagney movie before this.
Ooh.
So to see old Jimmy Cagney, and you know, over the years, if you've watched Looney Tunes at all, you know, you see the impressions of you know, old time Hollywood. Well,
James
yeah,
Cagney.
that kind of thing. And then when you see it actually play out, you're like, oh, that is exactly right.
Yeah, that wasn't hyperbole. That was 100. It wasn't over exaggeration. That is just nailing completely the bit.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
I'm gonna make sure nobody gets leave. See, like, wow, wow. For those of you that are unaware, that's got to go on a T-shirt. Mr. Roberts is he's sort of the antithesis to everything that I've been saying about glorifying war throughout the night, because he is had a coughing fit. He is a guy on a ship that has not seen action throughout the entire war, and
They're bored.
yeah, they're bored out of their minds. They're
Oh my
just
god.
craving action, and that's the exact opposite of everything that I've been talking about in the movies that I've listed so far. But it does reel it back in by the end. But I won't go there because if you haven't seen it, you see it. Anyway, Mr. Roberts is the only sort of buffer between um, the captain or the lieutenant commander. Yeah, these naval ranks, they're getting me all flustered because you watch a pirate movie, there's the captain, you know, he's the man in charge. And with actual military naval movies, you're like, it's lieutenant commander, you know, there's lieutenant junior grade.
Oh, you're not going to get any sympathy from me because yeah, pirate even the pirates had ranks. You just don't hear about them.
Yeah, but the captain was the captain.
Okay, that is true. He
The
was the
person
captain.
in charge of the ship was the captain.
Huh.
And it's not just, you know. Anyway, he's he's the buffer because the guy in charge is, for lack of a better term, a total tool. He feels like you should be working 24/7 all the time. And if you're not going fast enough, you will be deprived of
You'll be deprived of. Did we lose you, Josh?
running
There
to
we go.
Morton. So when they finally do meet, he's like, "Who are you?" He's like, I'm Ensign Pulver." So he says, "You must be new. How long have you been on the ship?" He's like, 3 months. It was something like that. I don't remember exactly. If I did, it would be funnier." And he's like, "You've been on the ship how long?" It's like, yeah. And the thing about Instant Pulver is he's the guy that's always like, "Oh, I'm gonna show him. I'm gonna show the captain. You know, I'm gonna because you know Morton's nickname was kind of the captain, but he's like, I'm gonna show him. I'm gonna show him what's up. You know, basically." and vows to prank him. Um, he has a very very nice arc, even though it's you know people don't give Jack Lemmon a lot of credit for you know drama, and this is by no means a drama for him. Um, and in fact, it is more comedic than dramatic. Um, but Jack Lemmon doesn't get enough credit for how serious his comedy can be. I don't know if those are the right interpretations that I'm going for, but the fact of the matter is, this is a stellar cast telling an amazing story about a crew that is just headed up, you know, you can't see me, but I have my hand at my head here, like up to here with the guy in charge, and not because he's got a screw loose, not because he's crazy, not because there's anything technically wrong with him. He's just a jerk, and he wants to be the best, which is not a problem in and of itself, but he's pushing his people beyond what they're capable of. And by the way, they're already the best, essentially, for what they're doing, where they are, not in combat. They're doing an amazing job. And whenever the Navy tries to reward them for that, it's still just not good enough. So Mr. Roberts has to do everything he can. Henry Fonda has to do everything he can to keep the men, the guys, the morale high, the spirits high, even though he himself is so dejected after request for transfer is denied, because he wants to see combat. He doesn't want to get through a war without ever actually having been in the war. And it's a silly ambition from my perspective, but for some reason he's the guy that says, well, I signed up for a reason. I'm here to kill the enemy. And it's not a bloodlust thing. I think it's an honor thing. He wants to be able to say that he served honorably defending the United States, which he can't do if he's just kind of sitting somewhere babysitting a bunch of people that are doing their job, even though the commander says they're not. Mr. Roberts is definitely a great movie from 1955. You should watch it. And um, I don't want to spoil anything else, but like I said, as the movie progresses, it does mix comedy and drama. Not drama, but it's it's not it's not your typical war movie. And like I mentioned before in the Kid Mutiny, the antagonists and or the antagonist is from within their own ranks, higher up. But at least in this case, Mr. Roberts is the guy that's there to make life better for the people under him. Mr. Roberts, number 6. And I'm going to beat you to it and say it's a great pick.
you know, um, I, I think you're right about Lemon. There's there's something about him in all his movies where you identify the same actor, and he kind of has a pattern, but all of his characters are sort of unique. So you don't find him being the same in every movie, even though some of his characteristics feel the same, which makes him kind of unique. I think that was, yeah, that was the way to say that. Okay,
Watch out
so
for palm trees too, by the way.
all right, cracking into number our number, or the top of our list,
Top five.
the top five. Um, okay, this movie, this is another movie I doubt very many people have seen, but this one definitely needs a shout out. It got really mixed reviews when it came out, and I get it, you know. I also, you know, have this, I should do a podcast on this at some point in my Storyteller Power Hour about how the horror genre, both in literature and in movies, gets a really bad rap. And I think it's because people don't quite understand what is being presented, both from the, you know, the bigger analogy being sort of presented, but then also just sort of the small metaphors along the way that give us this idea about what is happening here. This movie is not quite, you know, it doesn't need that kind of like deep understanding, but I feel like it suffers from people not understanding what was being presented here. So the movie is called Below. It was released in, excuse me, it was released in 2002. Now, the premise of this movie is this: there's a submarine, and it picks up these survivors of a what we're understanding is a German U-boat attacked a ship. And so they pick up some survivors, and one of the survivors, now this is a submarine, okay, so this is kind of important, right? These people on the sub have been together and eh, probably, you know, a little bit attention starved for a long time. And so they pick up one woman who is a nurse and two other crewmen. Now, it becomes pretty apparent, um, as we kind of go through everything, that something is amiss. There is plenty of drama around just having the nurse. Her name is Claire. Just having her aboard is a lot, right? But they still have to deal with the fact that they are a submarine. The name of the submarine is the Tiger Crew, and that they still have this German boat out there that they don't know where it is. They know that, you know, the boat that they rescued the people from got was torpedoed, so they know that there's still danger out there, and they're trying to figure out, you know, how to navigate both of those things: interpersonal drama and the larger at war stuff. And it some crazy stuff starts to happen. um there's a submarine that they had sunk, and what they come up with is sort of like, you know, this interesting leftover flotsam from the submarine that they sank. And it feels like maybe there might be something important there. And then we have the people on the tiger shark who start to hear disembodied voices. They see, you know, kind of like strange things. um Odd things start to happen to the submarine. There aren't explanations for all of these crazy events that they see happening, and whether they're real or not real is sort of beside the point, because they have to deal with both the closed quarter environments that everyone is in, and also this idea that something isn't right. Now, it turns out that one of the people that they pick up is actually a German spy. And that obviously is a pretty big catalyst for, you know, what needs to happen here. Um, but then the next thing that there's so much supernatural sort of things that seem to be happening, and one of the crew members, they call him Weird Wally, and he's played by Zach Galifianakis. Now, listen, I don't know if you know anything about Zach at all, but it's really rare to see Zach in a role that isn't comedy, and this is straightforward drama, and he really kills it. I mean, it's really good. And he tells everybody basically that the submarine is haunted by this thing called a malediction, and that in order to get rid of the malediction, in order to have the malediction be satisfied, um, because he thinks that they're stuck in sort of like a purgatory, um, that certain things have to happen. Um, they can't, no, there's all these different factions that kind of emerge, and no one can really agree as to what to do. But what becomes very apparent is this idea of the malediction. It is sort of like the best of the best conspiracy theories, because at the time everybody's looking for a reason for everything that is happening to have happened. And just again, really crazy stuff starts to happen. um I loved this movie. I loved it for the cramped feeling of, like, when stuff happens, there's nowhere to go. You can't run. There's no place to hide on a submarine that's going to get you away from the things that were happening. um the disembodied voices feel very much like, well, what are you hearing, and is it just the submarine? But there's all this great sound editing in it as well that just sort of like adds to this atmospheric terror. It's really, really well presented, and the idea that this is somehow German manufactured, that the Nazis had something to do with everything that's happening, and also are acting as the external sort of dread from the outside. They obviously, they don't want to be torpedoed, they don't want, to be pinged, they don't want anybody to know where they are, creates another problem all by itself. It's really an epic movie that, kind of deals with what people may, and I'm not saying they're dealing with supernatural stuff, but how being in such close quarters, and especially during wartime, adds to this idea of, what seems ridiculous all of a sudden seems maybe like, okay, sure, malediction, why not? Could we be in purgatory? Well, let's just consider that for a moment. Whereas during normal times, I don't think you would be feeling that way, because you wouldn't be as disconnected. You wouldn't feel like, that the world was against you in the same way that they were feeling like the world was against them. Anyway, um the submarine tiger shark uh is actually quite, it almost acts as its own character in this movie. I won't give away what happens at the very end. Again, not a super happy ending, but a really good ending. So, my number 5 is the movie called Below, released in 2022. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else in the cast that's like, would we know who they were? I don't think so, though. I mean, Olivia Williams, maybe you might know her, but other than that, can't think of anybody specifically that was like, oh yeah, everybody's gonna know who this person was.
Once again, we have reached a place I have not been.
Yeah, no, this is not a movie that I would expect that people would have seen. It just isn't. It's just not. It didn't. It didn't quite make the, like, mainstream audience viewing. Oh, this isn't everybody's top 5 to watch for, this month or whatever.
Mhm.
It didn't ever make it there, but I feel like it was such a sleeper because it was good enough to be there, but it was also, there was like some poor marketing. It wasn't, and it was eclipsed by a lot of other movies at the time too. So, yeah. Still good though. Still very good.
Well, it sounds interesting. But the question is, will it be as interesting as my number 5?
I don't know. Will it?
Yes, if not more so.
Okay.
Because my number 5 is one that a lot of people have seen.
Okay.
And it is quite the take. Did I just talk like this?
Yeah,
I believe I
well,
did.
I'm sure you were channeling somebody. I seem to be channeling quite a few people today too. So yeah. Well, we're auditioning for different parts, so it's good. It's all good. It's all good.
People love voices, right?
Yeah, that's why we're here.
My number five is, like I said, it is an interesting take on the genre of World War II U.S. military war films, because this one definitely is a war film and it shows the horror that is war. But the thing that makes this unique, the thing that makes this special, is that it shows it from it shows the battlefield from the perspective of a pacifist.
Ooh.
My number five is Hacksaw Ridge.
Oh, good movie. Yes.
Now, I'm not a Mel Gibson guy, but even I had to give a tip of the hat for this one. Um, it is an amazing look at how Spider-Man saves people. Okay, it, it's Andrew Garfield. This is one of the first movies that made me go, "Holy crap! This guy's an actor."
Yeah.
In fact, my love for Andrew Garfield really blossomed. Uh, what was it, 2021, when Spider-Man: No Way Home came out, and The Eyes of Tammy Faye, and what was the musical he did?
Oh, I don't remember.
Though it
But
was
yeah.
directed by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Why can't I think of it? Uh, that guy directed it, and he's probably going, "Birthday buddy, why can't you remember the name of my film?"
Yeah, no, I have this feeling that Lin Manuel is probably listening to our podcast right now, and
Mhm.
kind of doing like a 180 whirling dervish, kind of thing going. I'm just so shocked. I'm shocked by the amount of um fake fandom that's going on here.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna get some mail from uh,
Wait,
the
who was in this?
Andrew Garfield.
Yeah, yeah, but who? But the name of the movie that you're thinking of is the was with, but it had him in it, but it was produced by Lin Manuel or written by Lin Manuel.
Directed.
Oh, directed. Um. Uh. Hmm. Oh, you know what? I know what it was, Josh.
Uh huh.
And I know why you can't remember it. Because it's one of those weird titles. And it's just escapes me. Tick tick boom. Tick tick boom.
Yes,
Yeah, right. And
that was
it's such
such
a
an amazing.
it definitely. But the the title always throws me off too because I always think the title is something else. I always think the title is something about a piano, and
Yeah, exactly.
right. Yeah, and it always messes me up. So yes, tick tick boom.
So in that one year, we got to see Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. We got to see him as Jim Baker, and we got to see him as, I don't remember the name of the character he played, but the guy that wrote Rent. All in one year, all three
Right.
very different performances. But I sat up and said, "This dude's an actor because of Hacksaw Ridge." And what is Hacksaw Ridge? Hacksaw Ridge, like I said, it's the story of uh, World War II American Army medic Desmond T. Doss, a person that existed, and how he was. Well, first he had to get through basic training. He signed up for the army and refused due to religious reasons to hold a rifle. He said he will not use a gun, period. And the army's like, it's sort of our thing. He said no. And they're like, we think this guy might be crazy. And then, the people higher up had to step in and go, for the last time, just because someone's religious don't mean they're nuts. And he got to stay in the military. But the real uh, the real story, the real part of the story that you tune in for is what he does on a battlefield when he don't use no guns. And that's I guess I kind of gave it away when I said he's a medic, but even in other movies where we've seen medics, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But in this particular instance, Andrew Garfield, Desmond, as it were, does not use firearms. He won't use a gun to hurt people. And seeing that story play out on the screen and having Mel Gibson, of all people, Mr. Crazy lethal weapon guy, and all of telling a story about this guy doesn't use guns. It's mind-boggling. But he tells a wonderful story. I think he gives justice. He does justice to telling this guy's story, and showed that even though everyone thought he was crazy for joining the army as a pacifist, he was very useful. I guess that's the like lowest like way I could say that, then the understatement of the century, if it were. It shown that even if you are a square peg, surrounded by round holes, there is a place for you to do something to make a difference. Hacksaw Ridge is a wonderfully told story, and I I enjoy it very much, and that's why
Nice.
it's my number 5.
Very nice. Very good choice. I feel like all of our movies are actually, well, okay, my movies are a little bit questionable, but I feel like all your movies are actually really solid. Like, I can't disagree with any of them. They're so good.
Well, we'll
Um,
see what happens on my number 4.
yeah, we'll see. Okay, well, uh, okay, so this is the last of my movies um in the square camp of, okay, we kept with the actual spirit of the list. Because my top 3 are over the top. Yeah, my top 3 are let's just say that these are the ones that take the most liberty with our topic. But for my number 4, this movie is called The Captain. And it, okay, it's an international historical drama. Um, it I don't know if anybody has ever even seen this movie. I actually was introduced to it because it was a part of an international film festival, and it got quite a bit of attention. And so I tracked it down and I really wanted to see it. Um, it's basically about a German war criminal who assumes an identity of a German officer, and that German officer had actually orchestrated the killing of deserters and prisoners at one of the concentration camps. It, it's the dichotomy here is pretty amazing. I mean, he's a deserter from the army, from the German army, because he does not want to be a part of it anymore. And yet he takes the identity unknowingly, takes the identity of someone who basically was killing the very people that he is one of. And so, in one way it's kind of brilliant, and in another way it's, absolutely upside down irony. Um, it's it is poignant and difficult. It is not the kind of movie that just escapes you, you can watch it and then you feel, one way, or okay, yes, I mean, look, I've never been through war, and thankfully, for the wonderful sacrifice that other people have made on my behalf, I have every sacred liberty, every, freedom that I enjoy right now, I know came from people and still comes from people who are in all kinds of services around the world and gave a lot. But we don't often think about any of the, let's just say, we don't give a lot of thought to what was happening on the other side, on who the people that we considered to be our enemies were. I mean, we do a lot of villainization of those characters. And, I think in our mind, rightly so. But we do sort of a disservice to history when we're not using art as a mechanism to also explore what might have been happening there as well. And I think that this movie in particular does a really good job of trying to humanize the other side of a conflict where not everyone was as, you know, enthusiastic about the wholesale killing of others, but how complicated it is to be in an environment that doesn't give you a lot of choices. It brings up a lot of very serious questions. It demands a lot of serious intellectual thought and philosophical lingering. I guess that's the best way I can say it, on topics that don't particularly have easy answers. And this movie, so I mean, from that standpoint, from just the intellectual standpoint, it works really well. From the production standpoint, it's absolutely astounding what they pull together here. I mean, first of all, some of the imagery is unbelievably just amazing. There are portions of this film which feel like they were plucked directly out of a World War II setting. I mean, it feels like 1945. But on top of that, there is also a bleak, stark sense of reality here, which I think echoes the idea that they're trying to get across. Um, Even when there are winners, there really are no winners. Even when there are losers, the cost is incalculable. And I feel like that's something we don't do a lot of exploration for, partly because, there is a kind of over sensationalizing of the aspect of patriotism in war. And don't get me wrong, there's a place for that. And I, like, a lot of other people, really have in the past enjoyed. I mean, my favorite movie of all time, although this is, off the World War II path, but my favorite movie of all time is Bridge on the River Kwai. And it is absolutely, at its core, a movie about the military. It's about the British military. It's about regimen. It's about, understanding interpersonal communication and relationships and what it's like to be a prisoner and yet still be able to take control. I love that aspect of storytelling. But we don't see a lot of movies that are made from the opposite perspective. We can all understand and empathize with the patriotic feeling that we get from the victors of war. It is a lot harder to pick yourself up and put yourself into the position of who the underdogs were. Not, well, underdogs is the wrong way to say it. Who the people were that we were fighting against for good reason, but also recognizing these were people too. So it's not to, say that this movie tries to over empathize with the condition of being in the German army. It is more to say there are practical and very personal things that happened to these people as well, that perhaps we shouldn't just gloss over in history and say, okay, well, you were on the wrong side, therefore your stories will never be told. And I mean, I'm reminded often of the idea that, the victors tell the history. So when you are victorious over whatever you're, especially in war, you will then command the narrative, and you will always be villainized and ostracized on the other side, whether your personal journey was one that was correct, moral, aim, whatever it was. And it's an interesting sort of thought process to go through when you have to think about these things. And this movie does that. It brings out the idea that, yeah, there's a lot going on in war that is more than just the patriotic bombs bursting in air feeling. There's a lot of very, again, to use the word, granular ideas that are happening here. And it's, when you think about how many people were involved in World War II, especially, the grist of the mill of war was made up of these people. So seeing one story is it's sobering, is very sobering. um I really, really liked this film for all of those reasons. But I also really like this film because it explores, it isn't afraid to explore the very dark nature of what it is to be human, that we're messy, and being messy as a human doesn't stop just because, or I guess I would really say it can be even enhanced by the fact that in war we have less of our inhibitions. We have less of the controls that keep who we are as moral people together. And this movie is not afraid to explore that. And I really liked that because, again, it's something to think about. And it's also set up really well. It's set up absolutely beautifully. The cinematography is immensely gorgeous. And the acting is really solid. So, um, this movie gets my number 5 choice. It is called The Captain. I'm sorry, gets my number 4 choice.
It's called what?
The Captain, and it was released in 2017.
There we go. Okay, that release here helped me out a lot.
Yeah, I figured. I'm sorry. And again, this is an international kind of film, so it's not something that was like, oh yeah, everybody's going to recognize it right away. But if you like World War II films, dude, this is definitely a movie you should not miss.
The premise sounded familiar. I'll say that. I feel like I've might have read about it at some point.
Mm. I mean, the interesting thing I think about this particular movie, from, like, if you look at this from the Rotten Tomatoes standpoint, the last that I checked, it was sitting at like an 84%.
Ooh.
And yeah, and that's kind of rare, especially for a war movie that isn't, the poignant, again, battling Normandy or whatever. It's a lot harder to get people to buy into the uh, smaller aspects of a war movie because it doesn't include some of that. So yeah, but I definitely think that you know y- they can't all be wrong. There really is something here. So definitely worth a check.
Well, my number 4 is a bit off the beaten path. I I have to admit, even I might not be fully on board with saying um, this is 100% um, in the heart of what the list is about. But you know what? It's a movie I enjoy. It is technically set during the period of time that we're talking about, World War II. And it involves the U.S. Navy. But it's not about going to war. No, it's about coming home.
Hmm.
It's about being on leave and seeing what you can get up to with a 24-hour pass in New York City. It's about what you can get up to when you're on the town. See what I did there?
Mm-hmm.
On the Town is my number 4. Uh, Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra star in this 1949 Technicolor musical that was also directed by Gene Kelly and Stanley Donen. It's exactly what I said it was. It's 3 sailors that are, hitting up New York City. They have 24 hours before they have to report to the ship. It's a musical, and they're looking for. Well, they're all looking for different things, but they all find stuff. I don't want to. Is it really spoiling it if it's a 1949 film? They all find love. How about that?
They all find love. Okay.
They all find love, and the really cool part about this is not the fact that you got these 3 sailors that they do what they do, right? They go to town, they sing and dance. One of them falls in love with a movie poster, or not a movie poster, but it's like a Miss Subway, uh, New York subway, where they just they pick a random lady and they're like, you're Miss Subway, and then they put her poster up on the subway trains, and naturally someone's got to fall in love with her, and they're like, we'll never find her, and then you turn and there she is, and it's like, right, because she rides the subway. That's how she got to be on the poster. Okay, yeah, that makes it does make perfect sense. Or whether or not oh, I forgot to get to the part where I was going to say a point. Now the point is, even though the guys are the guys and they're going to do their thing, it's interesting to me how in this year 1949 we not only had 3 very distinctive female counterparts to them, um, but these 3 female counterparts were unique and all very strong. None of them were fitting the typical, not that the premise needs a damsel in distress, but when you think of sort of that era, you might have like Guys and Dolls in mind, where you have an Adelaide who is lamenting, for her man, whereas this particular group, they know what they want, they know who they are, and they're not afraid to go after it. Whether it's a maybe half crazy cab driver that just keeps throwing herself at a guy, or the or the Miss Subway, whatever the title was. I'm sorry, I don't recall. But and how she is kind of playing coy about her own background, because she's being told by this admirer, "Oh, you're a fancy New Yorker. You'd never go for a small town boy like me." When in fact, they're practically neighbors. It is a wonderful story about having only 24 hours to kind of fulfill your heart's wishes. And it's filled with that wonderful thing we call whimsicality. And more importantly, I think for someone to watch this in the 21st century, decades generations after it actually uh, premiered. You can watch it and not have to cringe every few seconds over certain stereotypical uh, depictions that were notable at the time. It's certainly a lot less cringy than what was it? Take Me Out to the Ball Game,
Mm.
because that was what was the? I'm blanking on it right now. Did I get it right?
I think you did, didn't you?
Yes, yes, I got it right. Awesome. Because that when I watched that for the first time, I was like, "Whoa, that, ooh, ooh, this is yeah, rough, rough." But no, On the Town is something you can watch uh, with anybody, and not have to worry about anybody kind of viewing it through the 21st century lens and saying, "Yikes." So this has the 21st century, and more often than not, seal of approval. And of course, you can't wrap this up with it with just without saying it's Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra together doing a movie. What's not to love?
Yeah, right.
So that is why On the Town is my number 4.
All right. Okay, my number 3 is about as crazy as you get for a World War II drama involving the military that also is absolute insanity. There was a movie that was released in 2018. It Okay, I'm gonna preface this by saying that I don't know if my love of this movie stems from the over the top nature of it, or whether it just absolutely seizes some primal part of my my love of horror, and yet still telling a story that works. Now, I'm gonna say that, obviously, because this is a horror movie, it is definitely revisionist history. I mean, there's no way that you can get around this. Um, but it absolutely ties in to some of the, as I was alluding to before, the more sinister ideas that we put forth about what the Nazis were up to, whether their experiments were like, how nefarious were they and what were they really trying to do? And it just feeds into all of that juicy, wonderful conspiracy soup that just, can bring out as a writer the best ideas. Um, so the movie is called Overlord. It was released in 2019, I think. Oh no, I'm sorry, 2018. And basically, here's the idea. On the eve of D-Day, American paratroopers drop behind enemy lines to penetrate the walls of a fortified church and destroy a radio transmitter. They explain sort of why they have to destroy this particular radio transmitter in the movie. As the soldiers approach the target, they soon begin to realize that there's a lot more going on than in this Nazi occupied village than a simple military operation, making their way to an underground lab, and what a lab it is. The outnumbered men stumble upon a sinister experiment that forces them into a vicious battle against an army of undead. This synopsis does not absolutely do the movie justice. Part of the idea here is that one of the lead characters is injected with this serum that makes people undead, and he slowly is dying in this process while also trying to infiltrate in order to carry out the mission. It's superbly done. It is absolutely so over the top. In the beginning of this movie, it feels like it's going to go nowhere. And you're just like, oh, it's just like every other, there's a group of military guys. They're trying to get to their objective. They spend a lot of time kind of character building between each other. You get to know who each individual, person in the troop is. And you maybe even start to think maybe there's just nothing very special about here. But the moment that it escalates like from a 0 to a 100 in 1 minute. Um, and then it just absolutely carries that all the way through. I do realize that there is a level of absurdity to Overlord, and I don't think you can't watch a movie like this and not be aware of that. But the absurdity is part of the function of this movie, which I absolutely bought into. Um, you don't necessarily like love the characters as much as you are rooting for whatever the eventuality is going to be. And part of this is like, oh yeah, the destruction of there is just something about the overall sense of you just want the biggest possible outcome to happen, and the movie definitely delivers that. um I definitely got like serious video game vibes out of this movie, but it wasn't so over the top that it felt like, it wasn't a good narrative as well. It is just absolutely, here's the Nazis, these are the German bad guys. We're not, but in order to beat them, we have to join them. Um, I just feel like this was absolutely one of the best World War II idea functions, from a movie perspective, and I love watching this movie. There is something so phenomenal about seeing people in their unbridled self doing things that are so over the top that it just sort of like it definitely brings you along for a wild ride. um I would say that like that this definitely has kind of a cult classic air aura around it, and this is sort of like what people expect out of a cult classic. But then when you look at how many people really liked this movie, it gets solid ratings across Metacritic, Rotten Tomatoes, and every other rating system that I have known, because I think it just delivers exactly what it's supposed to be. The World War II aspect of this cannot be understated. The whole function that makes this thing work is this idea of, and I have alluded to this numerous times in my list, this whole idea of the nefarious Nazi experimentations. And what were they willing to do? How far were they willing to go? What was the worst of the worst that could have happened here? And this movie definitely does that exploration. It's not a, I mean, there's plenty of battle scenes as well, but it's less of a, you know, big sort of budget war movie, and it's more of a, yeah, we know you're up to no good and we're going to find out. So, number 3 for me is Overlord.
Your streak continues.
Of being crazy.
Of the films that I have not seen, I thought I had a decent handle
you
on a lot of things, but
you didn't see Overlord?
I've never heard of it.
Oh my god. So it was produced by J.J. Abrams. It was directed by somebody named Julius Avery. But you get a really strong feeling from this movie that a part of what makes it so good is the fact that although J.J. Abrams produced it, he didn't really have like a big hand in it. It feels like it feels like it was put together by people that sort of like this was their first time through the gate. It has that feeling to it, but it works. And that's really rare because oftentimes we talk about films that feel amateur, and that's the vibe that you get. This time it feels like, oh yeah, you know what, well, let's just do everything we want to do and see what happens. And this was the result. So
Well, it sounds like I have to get on the ball with this one as usual.
I think you'd really like it. I do. I really think that you would go, oh, this is good, this is good. um just as kind of like a side note, the director for this also did a movie that I just watched called The Pope's Exorcist with
I have
Russell
heard of
Crowe,
that.
and it was actually quite good. It's so telling to me how this works, right? The Rotten Tomatoes score for The Pope's Exorcist by the same director um, has an audience score of 81 and a critic score of 49. And so, like, you can see that audiences look very much for something different than critics are looking for. But in Overlord, the critic score is 82 and the audience score is 67. So everybody loved it. So definitely you should watch it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I added it to my watch list on that website that we frequently mention.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, enough buzz marketing, as John Hodgman would say. Ah, it's more buzz marketing, isn't it?
From now on, we're just going to call it Alphabet Cube, just so that we don't overuse Letterbox.
Ah, you did it.
Oh, shoot.
So what am I? Number two?
Number 3.
Number three. Really? Yeah, I guess that makes sense because yeah, it's already okay. My number 3. Well, can I quote the movie and see if you can figure out what it is?
Yeah.
Okay, I like this idea. Um, although considering the quote I picked, you'll probably figure it out pretty quick. Let me get into character. Here we go.
Okay.
Probably heard we ain't in the prisoner taking business. We in the killing Nazi business. Cousin, business is a booming.
Inglorious Bastards.
Inglorious Bastards
Yeah.
is my number 3. What can you say? Directed by Quentin Tarantino. Look at this cast list. Brad Pitt, Christoph Waltz. It's really the movie that made everybody go, Christoph Waltz, he exists.
Yeah.
Eli Roth, Michael Fassbender, Mike Myers. Huh? What?
Hey, what? What?
Barely recognizable in his role. Oh, and of course, Ryan from The Office. Okay, BG Novak does a great job in this, as a matter of fact. But Inglorious Bastards, you talked about sort of alternate history. Yeah, that's kind of the route Inglorious Bastards takes. Towards the. Well, I'll be honest. I don't know how accurate any of this is. I assume that French people existed. So I will say that's probably, accurate. And I'm fairly positive movies and movie houses existed. So those, I'm going to say, probably historically accurate as far as existing goes. But the rest of it, probably it's up in the air. I'm sure I could look into it and find out that it's all a complete fabrication, but I like not knowing. In case you didn't know, T-shirt forthcoming. Inglorious Bastards is the story of a group of American soldiers whose job is to hunt down Nazis. And not just hunt them down, but under the command of Lieutenant Aldo Rain. He basically finds Nazis, and he and his men scalp all the Nazis, like take their scalps, like Apache style, as he put it. But that is certainly a way to make you maybe hesitate when you're committing atrocities to mankind, thinking that this boogeyman is out there and he's going to come and he's going to take your scalp.
Yeah.
There are a lot of other sort of stories at play here. I'm not really going to go too deep into it because, quite frankly, time constraints limit what I can say. But I will say this: it has the Quentin Tarantino stylized dialogue that you might be used to. Brad Pitt plays a very wonderful character, Aldo Rain, and Christoph Waltz. I've heard people try to make the argument that Hans Landa is the greatest villain in cinematic history. Now, I'm not going to say that it's a patently ridiculous statement to make, but I will say that I don't think you can really immediately discount somebody for trying to make that argument. It's certainly worth a valid discussion. This is the movie that brings high tension just from sitting around a table having a conversation. Soldiers having a conversation. Mind you, they're on separate sides of the war. They don't all realize that, but it's intense. Quentin Tarantino does what he does best, I think, and that's build up a narrative and just let us live in his world for a little while. If I could fault it for anything, I don't know, because everything plays out so well and so cleanly. Maybe even a little too cleanly. Maybe you want to get mucked up a little bit. But Inglourious Bastards is a near, I think, perfect telling of a very specific part of a very broad war, and should be on anybody's watch list, if as long as you don't mind brutality. And I've actually heard some people say that it's a little hard to follow at times, whether it's the floating narrative going from one place to another, or just and yes, I have heard this. Why are they speaking so many languages? You know what? It kind of helps when you hear different languages coming from people that are supposed to be from different countries. I absolutely adore subtitles because it helps with the what's the word I'm looking for? With the buy-in, if you will. It helps me just completely get lost in the reality that's unfolding before me. If you haven't seen it, see it. I'm sure Jen's seen it 50, 60 times, at least twice.
I've definitely seen it more than twice.
And get on that. World War II, U.S. military. It it I don't want to say it makes you proud to be an American or anything like that, because so many movies from the 50s try to go that route, but it certainly made me very happy to be on the Nazi killing side, and that's a side that I remain on to this day.
Uh,
So,
you
Glorious
know,
Bastards.
it's the and I'm kind of glad that you brought this up, because I think that this is one of the pitfalls of talking about war movies, right? The movie that I mentioned before about the captain that kind of brings us into a totally different psychological side of the war. It th- we oftentimes find, I think we find ourselves psychologically not understanding how to root, if you will, how to cheer this idea of mass destruction and, let's just call it for what it is, wholesale killing. It's hard to reconcile that. And so one of the ways that, and this is true for a lot of other ideas too, but I think that it is especially poignant here. One of the ways that we can deal with some of these really hard hitting questions and sort of brace ourselves for what we need to understand is through fiction. And our fiction can oftentimes be more satisfying, in the sense that it brings us out of time and space, gives us a chance to act in ways that we wouldn't normally act, and be willing, no, not even willing, be able to cheer for what we normally wouldn't cheer for in our everyday lives, because it's fiction, because we know that there is a safety in that. And I think that Inglorious Bastards sort of brings that into the fold, where it makes us feel as if it is okay to cheer for the Nazi killing people, because this is what it's all about. And I think we need to give ourselves a little bit of both perspective and understanding that while those things are okay, and yes, this is, the fiction is what the fiction is, we understand it for being that fiction. And Inglorious Bastards is absolutely the way that I think expressing a darker side of patriotism for us, for the for the winning side, can kind of convey itself. Because although it's not related, and it certainly doesn't actually have a place on this list, there are some movies out there that deal with the very difficult deconstruction of German guilt that the German people together sort of all have as a culture, and why the particular rise in fascism today across the continent of Europe and even in the US is so disturbing, because of the enormous amount of blood and treasure that have already been spilled in pursuit of tamping fascism down. And I think that Inglorious Bastards really gives you that sense of, look, remember that this is, that the ultimate goal at the end of the day is not necessarily just what feels good, but what's right. What is the, where are we? What are we trying to do here? And yeah, so I mean, excellent choice. And also, it satisfies a lot of different needs on a lot of different levels. Uh, Um, as a side note, Brad Pitt in this movie makes me incredibly happy. There is something about that character that is just man, he absolutely nails it. Just nails it. Well, speaking of excellent performances, and I'm really sad that this particular character died. Not the character didn't die, the actor died. Um, I I was heartbroken when I heard that he was gone. He actually died in a skiing accident. But the movie is called Hannibal Rising. And you know, I don't know if everybody knows the entire story of Hannibal. I started reading the Hannibal stories, which might actually explain my son a little bit. I started reading the Hannibal stories when I was pregnant with my son, and um, I got so invested in I read The Silence of the Lambs first, and then I realized that there was another story, which was Red Dragon, and I read Red Dragon, and I got so excited about the move or the books that came next. And when Hannibal Rising came out, I kind of I man, origin stories are tough because in some ways, there's a magic behind not knowing how your fictive lead protagonists got to be the way that they are, or you just like lightly skim around the edges and hint at their trauma and hint at what drives them, or they give you sort of philosophical treaties uh in their monologues, and they say things that kind of give you that idea, but it's up to you to figure out who they are and why they are the way that they are. But Hannibal Rising goes in depth to explain in explicit terms why Hannibal became the killer that he is. And no spoilers here, it involves it involves the Nazis. It also involves the death and rape of his sister. It involves horrific things that create the absolutely terrifying character that is Hannibal. Um, this movie, it definitely veers a little bit away from the, okay, well, there's lots of military, and moves a little bit in the direction of they're German soldiers. So I mean, that's like, you know, you'll if this isn't the greatest pick for this list, I'm apologies, but um the idea with Hannibal Rising is that Hannibal um has a an absolute and terrifying relationship with well, with the kind of authority that stamps on the no, I won't even say the rights. I think the better way to say this is there is something about the structure of authority which makes Hannibal revert to who he was when he was watching his sister die. And there's a piece of this which I personally feel resonates all the way through with, again, this idea of what World War II was and the vast impact of it. Because in this particular story, there's a German invasion of the Soviet Union, y- and it's basically in the Baltic regions, which is where Hannibal is supposed to be from. And as things move forward in the story, we realize that the lasting impact of what was happening in the war absolutely uh upended Hannibal's psyche, like in a way that was there's no way that you could come back from it. And yet at the same time, it also spawned in him um a kind of elegance in his killing, in his execution of being a killer. I like, I hesitate to say like everything that happens in the movie because a lot of this doesn't really involve World War II, but I will say that the basic part of this is it's mired in the World War II effects on Hannibal and what he does. His Hannibal's revenge tour is so big that it absolutely carries him through multiple there's multiple things that happen to him on his revenge tour, and he absolutely um doesn't waste a moment in killing the people who he feels like harmed him the most. Some of this, I think, is like less sort of propaganda for the story and more there can be no other evil greater than Hannibal than what happened in the World War II arena. Like that's the basic comparison. And I mean, when you think about it that way, it makes Hannibal even scarier than he is in any of the other books. So this isn't my favorite book, but as a movie, it's not even adapted in sort of like the way that I would have imagined it was going to be adapted. But as a movie, it works so well and it is gorgeous. The movie itself is absolutely stunningly beautifully done. This is one of those times when the fascination with death itself becomes so overarching that everything about it takes on a different kind of light. Um, I'm absolutely in love with this movie, and yeah, so it definitely gets a really high spot on my list. I highly recommend it. Hannibal Rising, my number two.
I have not seen that either.
Oh my god, my list is full of movies you haven't seen this time.
As per usual, because you watch more movies than me. It's something I had to come to terms with. Um,
Well,
I'm used to being the one that sees the movies.
I think you know one of the things is I think I I I I may watch more movies contemporaneously than you do now, but I think the thing is because when I was going uh to college for filmmaking, my goal was like, you know, to watch 200 movies in a year. Like I had set these huge lofty goals and then things just sort of took over. Like, you know, I would hear about a movie diagonally from another movie that I was discussing and then that would lead me down a rabbit hole and then I would watch. And then there were also things like, you know, at the time when I was watching all of these movies, we didn't have the internet. Well, we didn't have the internet as an archive. And so I wasn't able to like get streaming copies of things. I had to actually go into libraries and like watch them. And what was available to me were movies that were older, movies that were parts of collections and things. And so I spent a lot of time building up a library of those things that I've watched. So don't think that, you know, you're not you're not behind anything. You're not it's not it's just that like I really invested a lot of time in watching movies.
Well, watch I watch a few every now and then now, and I try to get myself my my pile of shame. I try to get that, you know, lowered as time goes on. But I do still have a big old pile of shame that I have not gotten around to. I mean, I can look at my stats and say that when it comes to Oscar winners, I've only seen 34% of Best Picture winners. IMDb's top 250, I've seen 58% of those.
Wow.
Those stats are available via that website,
Alphabet soup.
Alphabet Soup. I guess it's time for my number two, if you don't mind. I just want to kind of do this briefly.
All right.
All right, my number two is called Battleground.
Oh,
I do believe I've talked about this maybe on the show before, but I don't recall. Battleground is a 1949 uh, war film. 1949. Let that sink in for a second. Because World War II ended in 1945, I want to say. I'm gonna go ahead and say that sounds right. So this is less than 5 years after the actual war ended. And it's not unheard of that, these war movies, got brought out and showed the heroic victory of the boys as they went overseas to make sure that the Nazis and the Japanese don't bring the war to our, backyards or whatever the case may be. But the thing that really makes Battleground stand out is that it's not that. It's not a film glorifying the heroic nature, the fictitious heroic nature of war, where your general is going to stand on top of his tank and have you know bullets whizzing by his ears. No one seems to be able to hit the man because he is almost godlike in his presence, and everybody gets that much more uh, energy just from having him around. No, Battleground uh, sort of takes an approach that seems it seems awkward almost at the time, because it tells the story of the 101st Airborne Division as they're fighting in Belgium, um, but they're under attack. They're surrounded. They're under attack. They're convinced almost that it's virtually hopeless, and you see the soldiers under the shelling crack and break. Some even desert because it's too much for the human psyche to really take in, especially when you're a young person. I can say young person now because I am not that age anymore. You got these young people that volunteered to just go overseas and fight the good fight, to come back as heroes, not realizing the brutal nature that is war itself, the machine that takes you in and spits you out, and not just the bullets and the bombs and the shells. No, just the idea that you're out there and you could be cut off from your supplies, and when you get cut off from your supplies, you're dirty, you're sick, and in some cases you're starving, all for the glory of war. And I'm not trying to go off on some sort of anti war tangent by any means, because I think in some cases you have to do what you have to do to fight a greater evil, like the Nazis. I mean, let's call it what it is. But in this, a movie that came out so close to the actual end, where the actual veterans are going to go see this film and see a more, I'm not going to say entirely, but a more accurate portrayal of the things that they did see and experience behind enemy lines, is in a word, there's the two words: groundbreaking. Because it's not a perspective that you would think would go along with that time frame. That we have this thing where, you know, um, there's a certain amount of time you take before you tell jokes about something dark. But there's also maybe a period of time that you take before you tell the truth about something terrible. In this particular instance, it's the terrible effect of war on people, on soldiers. Battleground is it betrays this, all of it. Uh, Mind you, they do it in a way that is not intensely graphic. It's not insanely vulgar. It is, Hollywood of the 40s. But I think all things considered, um, it should be considered one of the greatest war movies ever, especially considering when it was released. And that is why it's my number two.
Nice. Okay, my number one is
Number one.
quite simply called The Keep. Now, if you're not familiar with The Keep, this movie definitely has a cult following. Well, not a cult following, but it is a cult classic. The Keep tells the story. It was released in 1983, by the way. Um, and it's labeled as a supernatural horror film. Um, it's confusing. There's a lot in this movie that is like, yeah, what happened? Let me go back and watch that again. But it is well worth the effort to watch. Um, the part of the Keep's allure for the movie itself is that the movie, as it was filming, encountered so many difficulties. I mean, like it absolutely, it almost shouldn't have even been made. Um, there is a director's cut of this movie, which is 210 minutes. And for a 1983 movie to be 210 minutes, yeah, I think there would have been some kind of mutiny outside the theaters. Um, also, theaters weren't very comfortable back then, so yeah, there was that. But it was trimmed down to 120 minutes, and people hated it when it first came out. They absolutely hated it. It was not. It wasn't a movie that people. I think they really didn't understand it. It took a while for people to understand what was going on in this movie, and I think that a lot of that had to do with its release to VHS and then DVD. It wasn't even released on DVD until 2020, so it was a long time in between, but people did have it on VHS and they were able to sort of watch it a couple times and get a little bit more context and understand what was going on. Now, interestingly enough, this particular movie is based on a novel that was released in 1981, and the musical score was by a band called Tangerine Dream. Now, Tangerine Dream also did the musical score of the American version of Legend. So, interesting that the two of them have some overlap. But Tangerine Dream is actually a German electronic band, heavy use of deep synthesizer tones. They're actually pretty good. So it's a very interesting soundtrack that runs with this really ancient looking kind of structure that which is the focal point of the movie, which is the keep. um I think, let's see, what's important to understand about the keep? Um, Most importantly is there is it's set in Romania in 1941. Um, Something happens, and also it basically what the setup for the movie is they're trying to maintain control of this particular route through the Carpathian Mountains, and there's two soldiers, Lutz and Anton, and they have decided that they're gonna basically steal this metallic icon from inside the keep. But what happens is as they are, okay, here's let's steal this thing, they're killed. And then five more soldiers get killed. And then all of a sudden there are all of these other supernatural elements that begin to take form. Now, this is sort of like back before CG was really good. So, you're looking at special effects which are not fabulous, but that's not really the strength of the keep. The keep's strength is in the storyline. And the storyline is really about the execution of power structures. And what better way to have power structures enabled than having Nazis show up and basically doing things which are terrible, and also sort of disenfranchising the whole idea of anything being relatable in the keep that could possibly be supernatural. um some other crazy interesting ideas that get thrown around in here is that the keep itself is somehow an entity by itself, that there's something that it's not just the things that are in the keep, it's the keep that is an actual entity. And that and that and that it somehow like has the ability to punish people, which is just sort of fascinating because you sort of get the idea that who's on what side based on who's being uh slaughtered, who's being killed. Um there's a really massive overarching theme in here which deals with the idea of lusting for power. And I think I've mentioned this in some of my other movies. Lusting for power is truly a devastating aspect that can only lead to death. And as political rhetoric, the 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 idea of the keep punishing people that don't have the right intent, and the fact that it punishes people that are on the German side, really sends a pretty strong message about the war itself, and how here's this is we know that this is the message. The message is, you absolutely have to deal with the morality of something before you can dismiss anything else that might be happening. um I love this movie from on multiple different levels, but I love this movie for sort of being like, it whispers what I think we normally think of as something that's loud. And because it whispers it, you have to pay attention to all of the small details. You really have to pay attention to the dialogue. And there's lots of little cues that happen in this movie before the central, big slaughter happens. And if you're watching, you'll know what's going to happen. But if you're like sort of glossing over it, I can see why people were confused. The only thing that I didn't like about this movie, which I'll readily talk about despite the fact that it's my number one, is I wish that there had been an expansion on the lore of what the keep is, who made it, where it was from, why there is so much iconography inside, and what is it that is the keep an actual living entity, or is it just supernaturally infused to the point that it has just kind of taken on all of that energy and is maybe just exuding that somehow. I don't know, but I'd be really interested to see what the director's cut is, because I feel like there's a lot of answers to those questions contained in that footage. So, my number one choice is The Keep, and it was released in 1983. This is also the first time that I have ever heard the term uh glagoltic, because the old Slavonic ciphers that are in the keep are using this thing called a glagoltic alphabet. And I can remember being absolutely excited about researching what that was, and I loved it. I thought it was great. It was a perfect sort of hey, here's something you didn't know. We're going to make you think about it. So very cool. So the keep gets my number one choice. Number one choice.
If I turn on that old Mikey phone there, at least I think so.
It does help. I notice that it helps.
So here we are. My number one.
Number one. Number one.
And quite frankly, if you don't know what it is, I'm not sure what show you've been paying attention to.
Well, I'm pretty sure it's not Clerks.
I mean that fits the motif, right?
Well, I don't know what kind of 5-dimensional math that would require, but okay.
It's
maybe.
black and white. World War II stuff was black and white. And there are two people, Dante and Randall, who are in a war in the world. No?
No, I don't think so. I'm not buying it.
Okay, I'm going to have to go to my backup then. I got to find it first. Of course, all kidding aside, my number one with a bullet. See what it.
I see what you did there.
Is Saving Private Ryan. It does all of the things that I've been talking about, like all night, except for the singing and dancing part on the town. That was more of a anomaly on the list than anything. But well, there's no singing or dancing in Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan, it took the master storytelling and master filmmaking abilities of Steven Spielberg, maybe you've heard of him, in 1998, and gave us a depiction of World War II that wasn't heroic, that was incredibly brutal. And, well, someone will argue me about the heroic thing, but we'll get to that. Incredibly brutal and definitely worth every second of the 4 days it takes to watch. Okay, not that long, but it is definitely a long and clocking in it just shy of 3 hours. I believe it's listed as 169 minutes. I say I believe it, even though I'm looking at the runtime right in front of me. So, Tom Hanks, Tom Sizemore, Matt Damon, Vin Diesel, Giovanni Ribisi, Ted Danson, Paul Giamatti. You got this great cast of great actors that are, well, okay. If you've been living under a rock since 1998, the story of Saving Private Ryan is there's this group of soldiers that have to save, you guessed it, Private Ryan. And it begins with an insanely bloody, oh my God, the landing at Omaha for the Normandy invasion. Intense. There are anecdotal reports of people, World War II vets, being stricken with PTSD, having attacks while watching this sequence in theaters. It is insanely graphic. So if you haven't seen it, there's your trigger warning. But what makes Private Ryan so special? Well, here's the thing. All his brothers died. All of them. To a T. And there's this sort of thought that, yikes, we can't have this, family lose every one of their kids in the freaking war. We got to send somebody home. So they detached this special unit to bring him back, to bring him home, so he can carry on the family name. And it's about the sacrifice these men are willing to make to get their mission accomplished, to save one man in a war. Every character has a unique personality. Even Vin Diesel. Yeah, I said it. I know it's been a long time since he's, expanded from, you know, um, uh, you ain't nothing if you got family. You know what I'm saying? Although you could say this kind of fits in with that theme, since we got to save Private Ryan because he needs to get to his family. And little Dominic Toretto, Saving Private, never mind.
Little, yeah, it's good.
But the idea that these men are maybe not 100% willing and ready to sacrifice their lives to save one person, they are still agreeing that the orders are just and they will do whatever it takes to get the job done. And as their enigmatic commander, Tom Hanks, you might remember I talked about him a little while ago. There's hardly much better in this world than seeing Tom Hanks be the leader of something. And he does so with beautiful intent and wonderful direction. Tom Hanks is absolutely stellar. Even though this movie came out 25 years ago, I'm still not inclined to spoil, exactly what happens with the plot, because if you are lucky to be able to go into this blind, then by all means, please do so. But when it comes to honoring the people that sacrificed everything to help win a war against Nazis, this is a beautiful, touching tribute to those service people. And I say it honors them even more by being more honest with the depictions of what they had to live through, what they had to survive uh, during those days, those dark days in the 40s. Saving Private Ryan, without a doubt, was always going to be my number one, and here it is.
I got to say that movie is so disturbing to me that I to this day I still cannot rewatch it. I watched it once. I cannot rewatch it again. It was just so difficult. But
We
great
watched it in
choice.
American history class.
That was a really good choice. Ugh, wow. Okay. I have so many. At some point, we should definitely do a podcast that involves some of these ideas and touch points, because this is one of my issues with putting together this list. Although I loved this list and it was great, I have such a hard time with the fictive understanding of history as real history. And Saving Private Ryan is no different. I love it for what it is, but it is not history. And And I feel bad saying that because I'm not saying that the things that happened in the movie didn't in some way also happen, because of course we know that they did, but it is so important to remember that if we are watching a story, we are not watching history. And I'd feel like I can't say that in a voice that's loud enough, because we end up with people who believe that what they've seen in movies is what really happened. They believe that The Patriot is the story of the American Revolutionary War. And it's not. I mean, it may be that there is a small little part of what happened here. And yes, thank you for telling us that little part. But all the things that go into it do not necessarily mean that that's what happened. Or it becomes so overly simplified because it's a story that we lose larger perspective of what's really happening. And yeah, that's one of the reasons that I think war movies in particular are so difficult for me to mentally process, because I know that people watch these and think that's what happened. It's just, yeah, it's a tough one. It's definitely a tough one.
Then
So
let me jump in here real quick. Just so everybody's aware, I am praising Saving Private Ryan, not for its, uh, you know, line for line, this is what happened kind of accuracy, but the overall depiction of brutal graphic war. Just
right.
so you, the audience, are clear on that point.
And I mean, like, I have a lot of movies that I could have added to this list, because I do love, like, Battle of the Bulge. Uh, there are a number that sort of deal with both Normandy and the Battle of Midway. There's a lot. I feel like there are a ton of movies. South Pacific, I feel like, was like a grand gesture toward fictionalizing and understanding what happened. But it's fiction, and sometimes I get very, not upset, but I recognize that we have an issue, especially in this country. We have an issue with not being able to parse fiction from fact when it comes to our narrative history. And there is a difference between um fictive history, which is a thing, and narrating some of the things that I think are important for us to understand in history, and then saying, okay, well, here's what really happened. Like, this is the true story of, because it's not the true story of. I mean, it can't be. It really, unless you're narrating something in documentary style, if it's a story, it's a story. So that yeah, because I agree. I mean, Saving Private Ryan was an amazing film, and so were a lot of the other films that were on our lists tonight. But I just sometimes have a hard time parsing the idea, and this is going to dovetail into our homework for next week too. So I take this. I take this both seriously, but also understand that, hey, we have to be able to parse it somehow. And as a storyteller, fiction is the best way for us to understand things. And I even mentioned it in a couple of the movies. Well, we have no way to process this information unless it's through story. So I wasn't being critical. I was just throwing it out there that that was one of the reasons that this week I veered off into weird territory. Well, I'll recap my list, and then you can recap your list, and I'll give you some homework. My
Okay.
number 10 was Hellboy. My number 9 was Frankenstein's Army. Still love that movie. Number 8, The Dirty Dozen. Number 7, The Devil's Rock from New Zealand. Number 6, The Young Lions. Number 5, Below. Number 4, The Captain. Number 3, Overlord. Number 2, Hannibal Rising. And number 1, The Keep. What
All
is
right.
your list, Josh?
My number 10, U571. Number 9, The Final Countdown. Number 8, The Kane Mutiny. Number 7, Greyhound. Number 6, Mr. Roberts. Number 5, Hacksaw Ridge. Number 4, On the Town. Number 3, Inglorious Bastards. Number 2, Battleground. And number 1, Saving Ryan's Privates.
Nice.
I mean, Saving
Well,
Private Ryan.
yeah, I kind of knew what you were saying. Okay. So our homework for next week is kind of something I've been thinking about for a while. And the reason I've been thinking about it for a while is because I recently was listening to some audiobooks on the established understanding that we have of how Rome formed and why it formed in in any capacity. And I thought, we've had a lot of movies that deal with ancient Rome, or touch on the idea of ancient Rome. And sometimes I think we really take them for granted. Like we don't really delve into them very much because, I mean, let's face it, that was 2,000 years ago. And yeah. But sometimes I watch these movies about ancient Rome and I think, wow, that we could learn a lot just by realizing that we are really similar to the ancient Roman civilization. I mean, like in ways that, yeah, history repeats itself, but oh boy, this one's a big one. But I also realized that this is a very specific subset of movies, and I don't know if there would be enough on this list to make a full list. So I thought we should do the ancient world. So for me, I feel like this would be ancient Rome, or Greek Rome, like Greek and Roman civilization. But I am definitely thinking that, if it's like a story about Greek mythology, that is probably fine because it still fits into the scope. So classical world, films, ancient Rome, ancient Greece, that kind of thing. What do you think?
Ancient Rome, ancient Greece.
So if you think about it, like uh stories about Greek mythology, you definitely get there.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, just, movies set in ancient Rome, there are quite a few. Um, but if you kind of open it up a little bit to, you know, the classical world that involves Greece as well,
Yeah,
yeah, then it really does. There's a plethora of movies that kind of add in.
I'm pretty sure I already have my number 1.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
does Clerks count?
never mind.
Okay, I just wanted to see if I could, turn you into a pretzel for this one and see what would happen.
Ancient New Jersey?
Ancient New Jersey. Oh, good lord. Man, I know some people in West Patterson that would be super excited to hear the reasoning behind that. So,
Well, you see, in ancient Rome, they had black and white movies, and Clerks isn't black and white.
well, they definitely didn't have color movies, that's for sure. In fact, I think that they didn't even see in color back then. I mean, that was too far in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's all true. You know what else is true?
What else is true?
I did something Sunday.
Ooh, what'd you do?
I met up with my good friends, Charlie and Jamie. Shout out. I know for a fact Charlie's an avid listener of the show. So
Nice.
hopefully he's feeling better um, listening to this episode. But we got together, we watched RRR.
Nice. Good choice.
They had never seen it before, so I wanted to introduce them to it, and as
Too
well as
cool.
a little more Bollywood in general. Um, Here's the thing, though, as sort of a celebration of that film and what it is, I'd ordered some curry to, kind of eat alongside it.
Ooh, nice.
And I'll probably get with you off the air about specific questions I have. But the idea that I've been pondering is, wouldn't it be cool if there was just a website that I could go to sort of match some sort of meal with a movie that my buddies and I are going to watch?
Hey, if only there was. Oh, wait a minute. I have a great idea. Go head over to moviesandmeals.com
What?
because movies definitely demand some food. I mean, there's just no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, this that is a really good idea, Josh. I will definitely think about what to put together for RRR because boy, there were some really interesting ideas in there. Like they could make some really good dishes. Yep. I can even see maybe a little bit of a tiger theme going on. So I will definitely think about that.
Well, I was
Join me.
thinking the curry was a good touch because you eat it, right. You eat it, and um, you're like, oh, that's spicy. So there's you feel like there's going to be conflict, but it tastes good. So you realize friendship wins, and then later on you're like, conflict, 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 and then when it's all said and done, you're like, that was all very enjoyable.
Right. Also, there is definitely an art to putting together good curry that I think especially we in the West don't necessarily understand um, because curry dishes in India are very different from our idea of curry in the West. Let's just say that. But there's a way that you can eat it without killing yourself because you're probably not super used to eating spices that come from India. So, be gentle on yourself because you can definitely overdo it. But that is a great idea. Absolutely love it.
So moviesandmeals.com.
Movies and meals. And hey,
It's a thing.
if you're interested in any more of my sidetracked meanderings about stories, because that's what I kind of live for, join me tomorrow when I resume Storyteller Power Hour and we'll talk about some ideas that relate to exactly what we were just talking about before, which is how we pull together narrative history through our stories and why it is so important to tell our fantasy stories as they sort of recreate our past world, what we learn from them. I'm specifically going to talk about Wheel of Time because I feel like that one does a super good job. And there's really interesting Wheel of Time information that just came out. So I'm really excited about that for the Amazon production. So join me tomorrow, and I will definitely give you some food for thought in the Storyteller Power Hour. How about you, Josh? How can we find you? What's happening with you other than you're feeding your friends awesome food?
Well, it's summer vacation, so you know what that means. I'm bored.
No school till Monday? Oh, no, wait a minute. No school till July,
August.
August.
So it leaves me with a lot of time on my hands, which means you can keep up with all of those meanderings over at quadcomedia.com. Not that the site gets updated, mind you, but the site has links to the social media pages that do get updated quite frequently, especially when it comes to the photo shoot that Brandon and I did for the Wadcast while he was here in town and not on the West Coast. That's right, we were at the same place at once. So if you want to see what those look like, head on over to wadcomedia.com to find out what the links are to check out all of that cool stuff. And if you want to hear more of my voice, you could always check out the podcast each and every Friday night at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. over there, the Wadcast Facebook page, always shared by Wadco Media Facebook page as well. Give it all a like. And if you're listening to this at a later date, don't forget to subscribe so you can get all of your favorite episodes of 10 to 1 as they become available each and every Sunday. That's right. We go live on Wednesdays, but the recording drops on Sundays, and it gives you everything you need on Monday for your commute to work or your workout, whatever the case may be. We try to do our best to make sure you are entertained and informed. But if you want to join us for our live shows every Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, head over to wadcomedia.com for all the proper links. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and say it. Don't forget to send us what your lists are for the 10-2-1 topics. And when you do, maybe we'll read some of those live on the old air. And if you
Yeah.
want to join us for the conversation, we have a live chat. And we will pay attention to you, I promise. So that's I think that's everything.
I think it is. I'm excited about next week, and this was a really fun podcast. Thank you, Josh.
There is one more order of business.
Oh no, did we forget something?
Nope, just a little bit of handling some business stuff. For those of you that were listening to the Storyteller Power, and did not get a chance to catch the chat with author Brian Paone, don't worry, it's because it didn't happen. We might have mentioned forgotten to mention on air somewhere that it had to be postponed due to personal scheduling conflicts, and we are in the process of getting that rescheduled. So when Brian is ready to go, we will be ready to have him. Isn't that right, Jen?
Yes, it is, and I am actually really excited. Also, hey, I'll just throw it out there. If you have an idea or a suggestion, I know this is a different podcast, but if you have a suggestion or an idea based on any of the fiction that we talk about, send us a note. Let us know. Maybe we can incorporate it into a podcast that would make you happy.
Or any lists ideas?
Or list ideas. Man, we always need list ideas. Send them over.
It's funny because I have a list of lists, ideas that I have, but I never look at when it's time to give homework. It's weird. So
we're completely opposite because, like, I have a list too, but I just go through my list.
yeah, but that's why we work so well together.
That probably, yes.
But I guess there's only one thing left to do, Jen.
I can't imagine what that one last thing could possibly be.
Say goodnight, Jen.
Oh, that's it. Good night, Jen.